When I was vocation director, I had a room at the Cathedral Rectory. And for when I worked out of Portland, and living at the Cathedral Rectory, there were both priests who worked in Portland at the hospitals, as well in the parish, as well as a number of retired priests who were about 13 of us. One priest who had to retire early because he had a stroke was named Father Robert Lee. The actual middle name was E, so he used to go Father Robert E. Lee. Just those who are history buffs, that really was his name. And he could no longer drive because of the stroke, and he had lost his short-term memory. And this meant that he had to carry with him some sheets of paper that he would put in his shirt pocket, right? And they would he'd write your name down when he met you, and during the conversation, he'd look at the name if he wanted to call you because he couldn't remember names. But he was such a good soul, such a happy man. And I wonder what his priesthood would have been like if he had not had the stroke at such an early age. So one morning, I went down for breakfast and he was there and I was eating breakfast with him. And I remember I'd probably been ordained only 4 years at this time. And then I asked him, trying to start conversation, so what's on your agenda for today? And he said that he was going to be picked up by a cathedral parishioner and that he was going to have mass at the local nursing homes because that's what he could do there. And I was thinking I was trying to support him and kind of encourage him. So I said how lucky the cathedral parish is having him to say all those masses at the nursing homes, because there are a lot of nursing homes in Portland and masses at all of them. And if they didn't have him, the priest of the parish would have to say all those masses. And so I said, they are lucky to have you here. And then he said to me, Danny, which is the only priest that has ever called me Danny. And I don't know, I never told him my name was that, but he always called me Danny. Only my mother would do that, actually, whenever she called the rectory. She'd be like, is Danny there? And I'm like, yes, Mrs. Greenleaf, hang on, Danny. So I was the only priest that ever called me Danny. And she said, Danny, you have it all wrong. I am the lucky one. I am so lucky they let me do it. And as he was telling me those words about how blessed he was to be able to do ministry, when he spoke, those words were like arrows kind of piercing my arrogant, puffed up heart before a simple, grateful, happy priest who was just so happy that he could be a priest and say Mass. And I've prayed ever since that I never forget what God taught me on that day by Father Robert E. Lee. In today's gospel, we see Peter falling to his knees and asking Jesus to depart from him because he is a sinful man. And Jesus calls him and says, do not be afraid, because from now on you will be catching men and women for him. Peter received his call to serve the Lord. Now in the book of Isaiah, in that first reading, we have another person who is called and sent by God, and he knows his state before God. He says, woe is me, I am doomed, for I am a man of unclean lips, among a people of unclean lips. And then God then purifies his lips by having the seraphim come and take a coal and put it to his lips, sort of a symbol of purification. And then he says, here I am, Lord, I am here to serve you. And St. Paul in the second reading knows that he has become a follower of Christ to the Gentiles. An apostle of Christ to the Gentiles in what he called an abnormal way. He knew he was not fit to be an apostle because, as he said, he persecuted the church of God. He killed Christians or sat by and watched them and encouraged it. And then he says, but by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace has not been ineffective. In other words, his grace has been effective. in making it possible for him to serve. You know, today we hear about 3 people, very significant people in our faith, who served God. They knew who they were and how unworthy they were to do what it is they've been called to do. They know their faults, and they're so grateful for the gift of grace, of God's grace and forgiveness that allowed them to serve. And how blessed, how lucky, how privileged they considered themselves to serve the Lord in true humility. Their humility, though, was not this kind of pious dribble, or as one priest, a friend of mine, said, that would be, say, oftentimes when we talk about faith, kind of this saccharine kind of faith, meaning that something that is too sweet or sentimental or inauthentic is really the way it looks. It's a fake kind of sweetness, like the sugar substitute. And it seems to be overly sweet. But instead, those who counted the Lord looked straight at God, knew their unworthiness to do whatever it is God was going to ask them to do. And they knew how God had blessed them and allowed them to be present to him and to serve him. You know, spiritual writers use the image of a glass that's smudged or has imperfections. For us in this time of the year, especially after a snowstorm, there's a lot of salt on the road, you know, and our cars are filthy, at least mine is anyway, especially our windshield. And if the sun was the love of God and our windshields were our souls, you can see that it's pretty easy to see how dirty your windows are, to see right through the dirty windows when you're driving away from the sun. But when you're heading toward the sun is in your face and it's shining through the dirty windows, you notice all the imperfections and the dirt on the windshield. Sometimes you can't even see through it. When moving toward God, you see more clearly how graced, how privileged, how blessed, and how lucky you are to be in his presence, knowing how truly unworthy you are. And it's not a fake unworthiness, like I was accused one time of having, you know, a false kind of humility where we humble ourselves as the right thing to do in order oftentimes just to get out of work. Oh, no, not me. No, I can't do that. No, I'm not worthy, you know. Instead of one who knows that it's God who makes us worthy. And our language often betrays what we really believe in our hearts. Sometimes we act as if God is lucky to have us, you know, when really we are lucky, hopefully, to be able to be before the Lord. How fortunate we are that he allows us to do that and that we get to serve the Lord. You know, when sometimes the kids, when the parents will say, you know, I'm just lucky that they come to Mass with me. And I'm like, really? Why aren't they lucky to have the chance to go to Mass? Why shouldn't they be taught how fortunate they are to be at the altar of the Holy Sacrifice? You know, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. When people say that, you know, the parish is blessed, you know, that to have me as a pastor, I say that I am much more blessed to have been assigned here. And the faith in the parish is so amazing, and I think I've learned a lot from the people of faith here, and I'm hopefully becoming a better priest for having been assigned among you. And that's not just words. I really have learned that. And also, too, it's not that your spouse is lucky to be married to you, but hopefully you know from the depths of your heart how blessed you are to have your spouse, children, family members, to have people in your life who love you for the faith that God has given you. You know, when our souls look, when your soul is looking at God's love, or the Son, let's say, you see how hopefully unworthy you are, how much you really are. And that all of this is gift. All of this is God's gift to us and grace-filled. This is true for a humble heart in service of God. When seeing our friends or our work, our home, our talent, the service, the ministry, the sacrifices we have to make, that we are honored to be able to make them for God, maybe our entire life. You know, it is all so much more than we deserve. Isaiah and Paul and Peter were all so blessed that they could even die for God. That was their great gift. The Talmud says that Isaiah was sawed in two. Paul was beheaded in Rome. And tradition says Peter was crucified upside down, that they could suffer for the Lord. Imagine if we were so lucky, so privileged, so blessed, so honored to serve in sacrifice and even die for God. How lucky we would be here on earth, and more importantly, how lucky we would be in heaven.